Do you believe in karma? A petty online act pushed an innocent person into hardship. A silent hero was abandoned. But the wheels of fate always turn. And sometimes, justice comes from the most unexpected places. The midday sun beat down on the busy sidewalk, the kind of relentless urban heat that makes the air shimmer above the asphalt. Amidst the usual lunchtime rush, a young man named Ethan was energetically setting up his phone on a small tripod. He was your typical content creator, chasing the fleeting fame of the latest TikTok dance craze. His movements were exaggerated, his smile wide and perhaps a touch forced, all for the unseen audience on the other side of the screen. He was dressed in trendy, slightly ripped jeans and a brightly colored t-shirt that screamed for attention. He adjusted his phone, checked the framing meticulously, and then hit record. The music started, a catchy but ultimately forgettable tune that was currently dominating the social media feeds. Ethan threw himself into the dance, his eyes darting between the screen and his own reflection in the phone, making sure he was hitting every move just right. He even tried to engage the passers-by, flashing them quick smiles and hoping they'd jump into his frame, adding that coveted element of spontaneous fun to his video. Most people just hurried past, their faces etched with the impatience of city life, but a few younger individuals chuckled and gave him a thumbs up. Ethan lapped it up, his energy levels rising with each flicker of potential online validation. This was the game, the hustle, and he was determined to win it. He needed those views, those likes, that fleeting sense of internet stardom. Just a few yards away, almost swallowed by the bustling crowd, sat an older man named Walter. He was a study in stark contrast to Ethan's vibrant energy. Walter occupied a small patch of the sidewalk, his worldly possessions contained within a worn-out duffel bag resting beside him. His clothes, though clean, were faded and spoke of a life lived without much comfort. His face, lined with the etchings of time and perhaps hardship, held a quiet sadness. His eyes, a pale blue, watched the river of humanity flow past, but there was a distinct lack of expectation in them. It was as if he had become accustomed to being unseen, a fixture of the urban landscape that no one truly noticed. He didn't beg, didn't call out. He simply sat, his hands resting on his lap, his posture slightly slumped. The noise of the city, the honking cars, the chattering voices, the distant sirens, seemed to wash over him without truly penetrating his consciousness. He was there, a silent observer, a forgotten soul in the midst of the relentless forward march of everyday life. The sun beat down on him too, but unlike Ethan, who seemed invigorated by the attention, Walter appeared weary, as if the heat only amplified the weight of his solitude. As Ethan, still caught up in the rhythm of his dance and the pursuit of the perfect shot, shifted his position to find a new backdrop, his path momentarily intersected with Walter's space. He took a few steps back, his attention still fixed on his phone screen, and almost bumped into Walter's outstretched legs. "Whoa, sorry there, old-timer," Ethan mumbled, his focus immediately returning to his phone. He didn't really look at Walter, just registered him as an obstacle in his quest for online fame. Walter, for his part, barely reacted. His gaze flickered up to Ethan for a fleeting second, a flicker of something unreadable in his pale eyes, and then drifted away again. It was a brief, insignificant interaction, a collision of two vastly different worlds existing in the same physical space but separated by an unbridgeable gulf of experience and perspective. Ethan, caught up in the ephemeral world of social media trends, barely registered the quiet dignity of the man he had almost stumbled over. Walter, perhaps accustomed to such fleeting and dismissive encounters, simply retreated further into his own silent world. A couple of women, their arms laden with shopping bags, walked past Walter, their conversation animated. "Honestly, it's just not right," one of them said, her nose wrinkling slightly. "They should do something about all these homeless. It doesn't exactly make the city look its best, does it?" Her companion nodded in agreement. "I know. It makes you feel a little uneasy, too. You never know what their story is, but still." She trailed off, a hint of discomfort in her voice, but no real inclination to stop or offer any assistance. Further down the sidewalk, a group of teenagers snickered as they walked by, one of them mimicking a slumped posture and muttering something under his breath. These were the casual judgments, the fleeting moments of discomfort or disdain that often accompany the presence of the homeless in a busy city. Walter remained oblivious to these passing judgments, or perhaps he had simply grown numb to them, another layer of the invisibility that had become his daily reality. The world moved around him, offering opinions and judgments without ever truly seeing him. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee and sizzling bacon wafted from the small diner just across the street from where Walter usually sat. Inside, a young woman named Jasmine bustled between the tables, her smile genuine and her movements efficient. She had a kind face, framed by soft brown hair pulled back in a neat ponytail, and a way of making even the most hurried customer feel seen. Jasmine had noticed Walter some time ago. At first, he was just another face in the urban tapestry, but something about his quiet dignity, the way he never asked for anything, had resonated with her. Now, as the lunch rush began to subside, Jasmine carefully packed a small takeout container. It held a leftover sandwich, a side of coleslaw, and a piece of apple pie that was her personal favorite. She grabbed a bottle of water and slipped out of the diner, her eyes scanning the sidewalk until she spotted Walter in his usual spot. Approaching him with a gentle smile, she knelt down. "Excuse me, sir," she said softly, her voice a warm contrast to the city's harsh sounds. "I just thought you might be hungry. It's nothing fancy, just a little something from the diner." Walter looked up, his pale blue eyes widening slightly in surprise. A flicker of something akin to gratitude crossed his face. He hadn't asked for help, and rarely did anyone offer it without expecting something in return. He nodded slowly. A silent acknowledgement. Jasmine handed him the container and the water. "It's still fresh," she assured him. "Take your time." She didn't linger, just offered a kind smile and returned to the diner, leaving Walter to his unexpected meal. It was a small act of compassion, a quiet gesture of human connection in a world that often seemed too busy to notice. Across the street, partially hidden behind a newspaper stand, stood Chad. He was another content creator, a rival of sorts to Ethan, though his methods were often less about genuine creativity and more about manufactured drama and controversy. Chad had been having a slow day in terms of online engagement, and his eyes were constantly scanning the environment for any opportunity to create a viral moment, no matter how tasteless. He spotted Jasmine's interaction with Walter, and a predatory gleam lit up his eyes. He pulled out his phone, quickly adjusted the zoom, and started recording. He framed the shot carefully, making sure to capture Jasmine handing the food to Walter, but from an angle that could easily be misinterpreted. He muttered to himself, already concocting the narrative in his head, something about a restaurant employee giving away food, potentially wasting company resources, and maybe even hinting at something more sinister. He zoomed in on Walter's face, trying to capture an unflattering expression. Chad wasn't interested in the truth, he was interested in clicks, in outrage, in the fleeting attention that controversy could bring. He lowered his phone, a smug look on his face. He knew he had something here, something that could stir the pot and get people talking, and more importantly, clicking on his videos. Later that day, Chad's video surfaced online. It was edited to maximize its inflammatory potential. The caption was deliberately misleading, something along the lines of shocking. Diner employee caught giving away food to homeless man. What's really going on? The video itself was grainy and shot from a distance, making Jasmine's kind gesture appear clandestine and suspicious. Chad's commentary, added over the footage, was laced with insinuation and judgment. He questioned Jasmine's motives, hinted at potential health code violations, and played on people's prejudices and fears about homelessness. The algorithm, ever hungry for engagement, picked up on the video's potential for controversy. It started appearing in more and more feeds, sparking a flurry of comments. Some viewers, without knowing the context, immediately jumped to negative conclusions, echoing Chad's insinuations. They criticized Jasmine and accused her of being wasteful or even unhygienic. Others, perhaps more empathetic, questioned the narrative and defended the act of kindness. But even the positive comments contributed to the video's virality, pushing it further into the online spotlight. Chad watched with a sense of perverse satisfaction as the views and comments poured in. He was getting the attention he craved, even if it was built on a foundation of misrepresentation and negativity. The truth, or the impact on the real people in the video, was the furthest thing from his mind. The owner of the diner, a no-nonsense man named Mr. Henderson, was not particularly active on social media. However, his niece, a college student who spent a lot of time online, stumbled upon Chad's video and recognized Jasmine. Alarmed by the negative comments and the potential damage to the diner's reputation, she showed it to her uncle. Mr. Henderson, a man who valued order and avoided any kind of public scrutiny, was immediately upset. He didn't bother to get Jasmine's side of the story. All he saw was a video that painted his establishment in a potentially bad light and a flood of online comments, some even threatening to boycott his diner. The next morning, when Jasmine arrived for her shift, Mr. Henderson called her into his small, cluttered office. His face was stern, his tone cold. He showed her the video on his phone, his finger jabbing at the screen. "What is the meaning of this, Jasmine?" he demanded, his voice tight with disapproval. Jasmine's heart sank. She tried to explain, to tell him that she was just trying to help someone in need, that the food was leftover and would have been thrown away anyway. But Mr. Henderson wasn't listening. He had already made up his mind. "I can't have this kind of thing associated with my business," he said flatly. "I'm going to have to let you go." Jasmine was stunned. Tears welled up in her eyes. She had worked at the diner for over 2 years and had always been a reliable and hardworking employee. To be fired for such a simple act of kindness, twisted and misrepresented online, felt deeply unfair. With a heavy heart and a sense of injustice burning within her, Jasmine gathered her belongings and left the diner, the place that had been her source of income and a small part of her daily life. Chad's callous pursuit of online attention had real-world consequences, leaving Jasmine jobless and hurt, and Walter unknowingly at the center of a brewing storm. Ethan, as a content creator, was always on the lookout for his next story. He scrolled through his social media feeds, partly to stay abreast of the latest trends and partly out of habit. Amidst the usual barrage of dance videos and fleeting memes, he noticed a video that was starting to gain traction. The thumbnail was blurry, showing what appeared to be a diner employee handing food to a homeless man. Intrigued by the comments section, which was a mix of outrage and defense, Ethan clicked on the video. As the grainy footage played, a sense of unease settled over him. The homeless man in the video looked familiar. He paused the video, squinting at the still frame. It was him, the quiet, unassuming man who often sat on the sidewalk near his usual filming spot. Ethan replayed the brief clip, watching as the young woman, her face partially obscured by the low resolution, handed the food to the man with a gentle smile. There was nothing in the interaction itself that seemed shocking or scandalous, yet the comments were filled with accusations and negativity directed at the woman. A seed of doubt began to sprout in Ethan's mind. The narrative being painted in the comments didn't quite align with the fleeting impression he had of the older man, a man who seemed more resigned and demanding. Driven by a growing sense of unease and a flicker of responsibility, Ethan decided to investigate further. He remembered seeing the woman in the video working at the small diner across the street. He walked over, the bell above the door jingling as he entered. The atmosphere inside felt different, a little subdued. He approached the counter, where another waitress was wiping it down with a cloth. "Excuse me," Ethan began, his voice hesitant. "I saw a video online about a waitress here and a man outside." The waitress sighed, her expression weary. "Oh, you mean Jasmine? Yeah, it's been a mess." She explained to Ethan what had happened, how the video had gone viral, how Mr. Henderson, the owner, had seen it and, without asking for Jasmine's side of the story, had fired her. As she spoke, another waitress joined them, her eyes red-rimmed. It was Jasmine. She had come back to pick up her last paycheck and say goodbye to her colleagues. Ethan introduced himself and, with gentle prompting, Jasmine recounted the events of that day, her voice thick with emotion. She explained her simple act of kindness, how the food was left over, and how Chad's video had twisted her intentions. Tears welled up in her eyes as she described the unfairness of losing her job over something she had done with a good heart. Ethan listened intently, his initial curiosity evolving into a sense of outrage at the injustice she had faced. The contrast between Chad's malicious portrayal and Jasmine's genuine distress was stark and deeply unsettling. With Jasmine's tearful account echoing in his mind, Ethan's focus shifted back to Walter. He found the older man in his usual spot, seemingly oblivious to the online storm he had inadvertently become a part of. This time, Ethan approached him with a different demeanor. He sat down a respectful distance away. "Excuse me, sir," he began, his voice softer than before. "My name is Ethan. I saw that video." Walter's gaze, usually distant, flickered with a hint of apprehension. He nodded slowly as if expecting a reprimand. Ethan quickly reassured him. "I don't think you did anything wrong. In fact..." He hesitated, unsure how to phrase his next question. "I was just wondering, have you ever served in the military?" Walter's eyes widened slightly. He looked at Ethan, a flicker of surprise in their pale depths. Then, slowly, he reached into his worn duffel bag. He carefully pulled out a small, tarnished silver medal, attached to a faded ribbon. He held it out to Ethan, his hand trembling slightly. Ethan gently took the medal. He recognized it instantly, a commendation for meritorious service. He looked at Walter, his initial curiosity now replaced by a profound sense of respect. "This is incredible," Ethan murmured, examining the inscription. He saw a name etched on the back, a name that matched the faint lettering on Walter's old duffel bag. This wasn't just a homeless man, this was someone who had served his country, someone who had likely faced hardships that Ethan couldn't even begin to imagine. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fall into place, revealing a story far more complex and significant than a viral video. Fueled by his discovery and the injustice faced by Jasmine, Ethan felt a sense of purpose he hadn't experienced with his fleeting TikTok trends. He knew he had to uncover the truth about Walter. He started with the name on the medal, typing it into his phone. The internet, usually a source of superficial entertainment for Ethan, now became a tool for discovery. He spent hours searching, sifting through old military records, news archives, and online veteran forums. Slowly, fragments of Walter's story began to emerge. He had indeed served with distinction, participating in several peacekeeping missions overseas. There were mentions of commendations, of a dedicated soldier who had earned the respect of his peers. But then, the trail went cold. There was no clear explanation of how this decorated veteran had ended up homeless on a city sidewalk. Ethan dug deeper, cross-referencing names and dates. He found a few mentions of a soldier with the same name who had experienced personal tragedy upon returning home, struggling with the transition to civilian life and facing unforeseen hardships. There were hints of a family lost, of battles fought on a different kind of front, the battle against despair and isolation. As Ethan pieced together these fragments, a clearer picture of Walter began to form. He wasn't just a nameless face on the street, he was a man with a history, a man who had served his country, a man who had likely fallen through the cracks of a society that often forgets its veterans once their service is over. The realization hit Ethan hard. The viral video, Chad's malicious narrative, Jasmine's kindness, and subsequent dismissal, it all pointed to a deeper societal issue, a lack of empathy and understanding for those who are most vulnerable. He knew he had a responsibility to share Walter's real story, to bring the truth to light, and perhaps, in doing so, help both Walter and Jasmine find some measure of justice. Ethan sat in front of his camera, the small recording light a steady glow in the dimness of his apartment. This wasn't going to be another fleeting dance trend or a shallow attempt at humor. This was different. He felt the weight of responsibility, the need to set the record straight, and to give voice to those who had been wronged. He had spent the better part of the day piecing together Walter's story, verifying the fragments of information he had found online. He held Walter's tarnished medal in his hand, a tangible symbol of a life of service that had somehow led to this quiet anonymity on a city sidewalk. He began to speak, his voice earnest and sincere. He recounted his initial encounter with Walter and his superficial focus on creating trendy content. Then, he described stumbling upon Chad's video and the unsettling feeling it had evoked. He spoke of his conversation with Jasmine, the tearful recounting of her simple act of kindness and the unjust consequences she had faced. He held up Walter's medal, sharing the inscription and the fragments of his military history that he had uncovered. He spoke of the sacrifices that veterans make, often unseen and unacknowledged, and the silent battles they sometimes fight long after their service ends. He didn't sensationalize or exaggerate. He simply laid out the facts as he understood them, his tone respectful and measured. He called out Chad's manipulative tactics and the rush to judgment that had led to Jasmine's dismissal. His video was a plea for understanding, a call for empathy, and a demand for justice for both Jasmine and Walter. He ended with a simple message: we need to see the people behind the headlines, behind the stereotypes. Everyone has a story, and some stories deserve to be heard. Ethan uploaded the video, a sense of nervous anticipation hanging in the air. He had no idea how it would be received. Unlike his usual light-hearted content, this was serious, a direct challenge to the negativity that often permeated online spaces. He checked the comments section nervously, slowly at first, then with increasing speed, the reactions began to pour in. People were moved by Walter's story. Veterans shared their own experiences of feeling forgotten or struggling with the transition back to civilian life. Many expressed outrage at Chad's blatant manipulation and the injustice faced by Jasmine. The comments section transformed into a space of shared empathy and a collective call for action. People started sharing Ethan's video widely, amplifying his message. They tagged Chad's account, demanding an explanation and accountability. They also reached out to the diner, expressing their disappointment in Mr. Henderson's hasty decision and urging him to reconsider. The story resonated deeply, tapping into a sense of fairness and respect for those who have served their country. The online community, often criticized for its negativity, was showing its potential for collective good, rallying around a story of injustice and demanding that it be rectified. Ethan watched in awe as his video gained traction, the power of shared outrage and empathy creating a ripple effect across the internet. The online backlash against Chad was swift and severe. His follower count plummeted as people unfollowed him and left scathing comments on his videos. Brands that had previously collaborated with him began to distance themselves, fearing the negative association. The fleeting fame he had chased so relentlessly was now turning into a public shaming. Chad, witnessing his online empire crumble, tried to salvage his reputation with a series of increasingly desperate and insincere apology videos. He claimed he had been misunderstood and that his intentions were to raise awareness about the issue of homelessness, a claim that rang hollow given his previous exploitative content. However, the online community was not easily fooled. They saw through his transparent attempts at damage control, and the backlash only intensified. The algorithm, once his ally, now seemed to work against him, burying his videos in the digital abyss. Chad's attempt to profit from the misfortune of others had backfired spectacularly, leaving him isolated and facing the consequences of his callous actions. The sweet taste of karma, as some online commentators wryly noted, was being served. Mr. Henderson, the owner of the diner, initially tried to ignore the online storm. However, the sheer volume of negative reviews and the calls for a boycott started to impact his business. Regular customers voiced their disappointment, and the usually bustling diner saw a significant drop in patronage. Mr. Henderson watched Ethan's video. He realized he had acted hastily, based on a skewed online narrative, without considering the human cost. He reached out to Jasmine, offering a sincere apology and asking her to return to her job. He promised her better pay and publicly acknowledged his mistake, hoping to repair the damage done to his reputation and, more importantly, to right the wrong he had committed. Jasmine, initially hesitant, eventually accepted Mr. Henderson's sincere apology and his offer to return to the diner. She was welcomed back by her colleagues with genuine warmth and relief. The diner, thanks to the outpouring of online support and the owner's public acknowledgement of his mistake, began to regain its footing in the community. Many customers specifically came in to show their support for Jasmine, often leaving generous tips and sharing words of encouragement. She became a local symbol of kindness prevailing over negativity, a testament to the power of empathy in the face of online judgment. Jasmine found not only her job restored but also a newfound appreciation for the support and solidarity of her community. The online attention brought Walter's story to the attention of local veterans organizations. Moved by his service record and his current plight, they reached out to offer assistance. Walter, initially wary of offers of help, was eventually persuaded to accept. He was provided with comfortable housing, access to medical care, and the companionship of fellow veterans who understood his experiences. The isolation that had shrouded him for so long began to dissipate as he reconnected with a community that honored his service. He was no longer the invisible man on the sidewalk but a respected member of a brotherhood. Ethan, who had continued to check in on Walter, was there when a group of Walter's former comrades, who had seen his story online, came to visit. It was a deeply moving reunion, filled with shared memories, laughter, and a palpable sense of camaraderie. They reminisced about their time in service, the challenges they had faced together, and the bonds that time and distance could not break. For Walter, it was a homecoming of sorts, a reminder that he was not forgotten and that his service had meaning. Ethan's channel shifted its focus. While he still incorporated some lighter content, he dedicated a significant portion of his videos to sharing stories of veterans and everyday acts of kindness. He realized the profound impact that storytelling could have in fostering empathy and understanding. He continued to follow Walter's progress and occasionally featured updates on his channel, highlighting the positive change that had occurred. The story of Jasmine and Walter became a powerful example of how one act of kindness, amplified by truth and community support, could lead to meaningful change and remind people of the importance of looking beyond surface appearances, in a world often saturated with fleeting trends and negativity. The story of Walter and Jasmine serves as a potent reminder of the quiet heroism that exists all around us and the profound impact of simple human kindness. If you were touched by this story, please consider sharing it to help us continue highlighting the often unseen contributions of our veterans and the power of everyday compassion.